Welcome, my name is Filip Vostal. I work at the Institute of Philosophy at the Academy of Sciences, and welcome to the Inspiration Forum, which is part of the documentary film festival in Ji.hlava. The Inspiration Forum takes place every day, starting today, October 27th, until November 7th, and every day from 6:30 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. So we will have two debates every day and every evening, actually. So the topic for this debate, the debate which will take place in the following hour, is about the language of crisis and the language of responsibility and the relation between these two languages. Very quickly, I'd like to tell you what's next. First of all, I will just introduce the debate, and then I will also introduce our distinguished guests, and then I will ask them a question, and all of our guests will respond, hopefully, to this question. And then, after these responses, we will have a short discussion, and then I will ask my second question, and then the structure will be different, because then we will go to the streets of Ji.hlava and we ask the same question to the local inhabitants. And then we will have another discussion. We will discuss both questions, the first and the second as well, but I wanted to say hi by removing my hat, and I forgot to do so, so let me do it right now. And then, after all that, we will have something which is called Q&A. So we will answer questions from our viewers. So I will read the questions from our viewers to our guests. We will have questions asked on Facebook and on YouTube. And to wrap it up, I will try to highlight, let's say, 3 findings from our panel, from our discussion. So before introducing our guests, I'd like to say very, very briefly, I'd like to speak very briefly about the word crisis and about the word responsibility. We can use the word responsibility or accountability. The word or the notion crisis is part of the diagnosis of this era, but at the same time it is an overused notion. But this doesn't mean that some processes and situations in the world where we are living are not critical. We experience crisis with our neighbors, with our partners. We experience communal politics, municipal politics crisis, global politics, governmental politics, crisis of democratic governance. We are experiencing a crisis of trust. This is something I'd like to discuss. And also the ethos of democracy. Democracy is in crisis, which is quite serious. And some authors have even been saying that modern capitalism that has been established in British factories is in a permanent crisis. But at the same time, it's necessary to add, and it's also essential to add, that the process, the framework of which is crisis or a problem which is happening in the context of crisis, or a phenomenon which is happening in the situation or in the context of crisis, allows for irresponsible solutions often, which are often not governed by democratic processes. So my suggestion is the following. I say that we are currently situated in 5 different crises. The first crisis, or 5 crisis moments, so the climate change, and which is no longer called global warming, but global heating. Second crisis, that's the first crisis. The second crisis is the biological threat, let's say, COVID. There's nothing to add to this. My mask and the way we are communicating are proof of this crisis, and this can be just an entree of this biological threat. The third crisis is a lack of trust in expertise and science, and the fourth moment of crisis is a long-term nuclear armament threat, and the fifth moment of crisis is a bit different in its character, and it's the crisis of imagination, because as we know very well from different sayings, a crisis is also an opportunity to imagine a different world, a world that differs from the one that we have created together. In all the corners of our society, we admire innovations, whatever it means, but we don't hear that much about changing governance, changing elections, about creating hybrid forums and parliaments of things which would connect various living and non-living actors of this world. We can imagine connecting, can we actually imagine connecting and involving various technologies in the co-creation of a post-apocalyptic world? Can we imagine a different notion of wealth? Can we imagine something which is called a responsible stagnation? These are the questions that we will ask during this debate, and we will try to find at least a partial answer to these questions. And I think that the current situation, lockdown, as it is called, which is obvious and which is present all around the world to a smaller or greater extent, gives us time, to some of us at least, time and space to consider collectively even radical changes, to consider a world where responsibility will not fall into this trap of overused words such as the word crisis, because crisis is already an overused word, or the word innovation or competitiveness. These are the overused words that have lost their meaning, because responsibility means reflecting and thinking about the impact of our behavior, of our actions. On the other hand, we must also focus on our self-centeredness and on our cynical passiveness. So I think the moment of responsible reflection will help us to avoid falling into hyper-individualized hole or trap of those institutions, organizations, and individuals who have chosen not to choose anything. And I think that this would be the worst option, just passively watch what's happening around us. Because various philosophers have said future is not determined, is not decided, future is in our hands. So this was my introduction, and now the more important thing, I'd like to introduce our guests.
Karel Kovář.
Karel Kovář, or Kovy, as he's known to Czech viewers. He
řekněme, člověk, jeden
He's
významnějších
a man, one of the most important
v České republice.
influencers. I don't know, I don't like this notion, but I have to use it. In the Czech Republic, he focuses on various topics. His YouTube channel, I checked this today, is followed by 830,000 people, which is roughly 10% of Czech population. He's written 2 books. The Forbes magazine regularly includes him among the most influential people on social media.
Líbilo se mi v jeho medailonu, že se
I really like the fact that he sees himself as a filter or as a medium, if I can translate it like this, or when he is not afraid to take part in controversial debates and speak about controversial phenomena and happening around him. That's quite interesting. And another thing that I'd like to say about Karel, something that was quite intriguing is that he focuses on economic inequality and education. These are key actions. And then we have Marek Szolc. Welcome, Marek.
Marek Szolc, welcome. He's a lawyer for public policy and he's an expert in sustainability. He worked in all kinds of capacities, both government and non-governmental positions. He currently works at the Warsaw City Hall, where he chairs the Committee for the Environment. What caught my interest in what Marek has to say about himself, that Poland, with its unpredictable tendency to create various political concepts and completely inadequate policies in the field of environment and climate change, is a very difficult battlefield which we cannot maybe even imagine in the Czech Republic. Eszter Nova, our third panelist, is a political scientist who teaches political science and history at the Severo Institute, I believe, and she deals with the subject of acquired helplessness or learned helplessness when, as various autocracies are created, the citizens get used to the fact that they can do nothing against their dictator, and they sort of accept the dictator or autocrat, start believing there's no other choice, change their opinion about the dictator and adapt to the situation, which is very good for the dictator, which is very conducive to the dictator when nobody, or almost nobody, speaks up loudly or revolts. So much about the introduction of our panelists. I hope I'll sticking to the schedule, at least somehow, because that's very difficult to me. So the first question I want to ask you all is, it's a question I made up, I confess. This is the question. As I've mentioned, crisis is a very problematic word, but crises happen and they will always happen. There will be crises of all kinds of types, depth, and they will last different periods of time. So I want to ask you all if you can give an example of a critical moment, a moment of crisis in your activities, in your lives, both personal or professional as you wish, and perhaps suggest how such crisis could be turned into an opportunity that would open a space a democratic space for a responsible strategy, solution, elimination, or mitigation of this crisis. I'd like to ask you if you could be as specific as possible. We have 10 minutes for all of this. So that's 3 minutes for each one of you. Can you do that? That would be perfect if you could. Eszter, please, could you start?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. So, well, I take an issue with your question. I really loved your introduction to this conversation, and I like to cling on to the part that is most relevant to my research, and that would be the idea and the question that you pose, that why people who should take responsibility or take action do not take action. What is the difference between people who otherwise could, would, and disagree with what is happening? And let's just talk about environmentalism or politics, or some issue that you want to change. Some people do take action when they disagree, some people don't. What is the difference between these people? Taken that they all disagree with this, so they're not talking about people who actually support autocracies. So, and my answer to that question would be that the people who internalize helplessness, the people who believe that nothing they can do has an impact, it cannot change anything, will be the ones who don't take action. And it is not because they are mean people, it's because, and it's not a crisis is not a moment. It's a slow process during which you learn that you try things and it doesn't work, and you try another thing and it doesn't work. And in the end, you will just stop trying. And not just stop trying, but you stop getting outraged about the bad things that you disagree with, simply because outrage is very painful when then nothing really happens and you cannot do anything. And with time, and I'm talking about an entire country here and in some other countries out there, with time you will be very cautious getting outraged because it is so painful when you're disappointed again. So that is very conducive to autocracies. People do anything in their power to reduce the sense of helplessness, the sense of it, not the actual helplessness. The way they perceive that they are helpless is not necessarily the reality, but their perception. And in short, they learn that petitioning or protesting or legal means or media doesn't work, their outreach doesn't work. So all these things are struck and just sit and they don't do anything. Say, you want to protect that tree, you want to protect that park, and you don't go out, even though you otherwise would. And that's not because you're lazy, it is because you don't believe that you can have an impact. If someone would guarantee that if you go out and do that protest, it is going to change something or something will happen, people would. In fact, 80% of people are not free riders. Forget that entire notion. They are conditional cooperators in every situation. If they knew that others would cooperate, they would cooperate. If they knew that others would move, they would move. It's just that they don't think others will move. That's why they think there's no point moving. In other words, they are helpless. They think it's inevitable. So when they say they don't care about something, it is really just a symptom of their learned helplessness. And the important thing, and I think this is the inspirational part of the story, is what is the opposite of learned helplessness? Because if you want to fix a situation, if you want to have a protest that finally works, if you want to make people do something or take action, you actually have to break this wall of invisible wall, even to them, definitely to you, because that's not what they say. They say, I'm my own person, I'm my own man, I'm doing everything. But in fact, they're not doing anything. They change their mind. They can't change the world, but they can't change their own minds about it. And that's what they are doing. So in learned helplessness, your action and the impact, and there's no link in between the two. You take action, there's no impact. You try something, it never works. So in your mind, that link between the two things is broken completely. Even when the door is open, you could leave, even when for the outsider it is completely obvious that it would work, you still won't do it. You unlearn the link between the two. The opposite of it, what do you call when someone is seeking a reward, someone is hoping for something, someone keeps trying something, even when it's obvious that they're not going to happen? It's not just Don Quixote, but imagine people who are really excited about something, really is reward-seeking behavior. That means that they have a link between an imaginary reward and their own actions, even when there's no link between the two. That is called addiction. Addiction, we are trained to say that it's a bad thing, but it's a mechanism, really. So once you did something and something happened, that was an impact, you really get hooked on that feeling and you want to go and do it again. You really want that impact. Any small impact works. That's very important. And so you want to take people who feel that nothing they can do can actually change the situation, and try to unteach this lesson. It's a very tricky part, actually. And what you do is to offer something to do, some little impact, something that's definitely doable. This is why a protest where we just standing here with signs that this is what I want, this is what I don't want, is never going to achieve anything. At least they have to march somewhere, or I don't know, they want to, get into a building or read something on television, or, they have some goal. They must have some goal. And if they accomplish it, they really get hooked on that thing, no matter how small and irrelevant. It's like the feeling you have when you see someone else winning an important legal battle despite all the odds. Now imagine if you were the one who did that, who spent years doing that legal battle. You get hooked on that feeling, and others don't. And so this is the lesson from it. Try to show some impact. Every time you want people to take action, make sure that you attach some tiny little thing, that this way you can make an impact. It can be tiny things like, wearing a pin, but that's just signaling really, but, something, some nonsense, like, everyone bring a rose or something that, that shows that I did something and something happened. It's very important. And don't get people in a situation when there's definitely they cannot win. Because, don't organize protests when everything is already over and that kind of thing, because it just sinks people even deeper into this sense of helplessness. In autocracies, I think it's very important to know when to call people to protest and try something and when not to, when it's really just grinding them down and teaching them that they are more and more helpless. So that was my reaction to your question.
Thank you very much, Eszter. I'm very sad, but I have to interrupt you now. Time is our enemy.
It's almost an existentialist comment, and I'd like to give the floor to Karel. Maybe I could respond to the question I asked. If I understood the question correctly, it was quite a personal question. It could be personal, but it doesn't have to be. It's up to you. It can be personal, but it can be also professional, organizational. I am thinking about it. I am 24. I haven't maybe had the opportunity to experience a real crisis, and I am grateful for that. The only crisis that I've experienced is a creativity crisis, which is quite difficult for someone who gains his living using creativity. And I overcame this crisis by reorienting my work, and I established a new YouTube channel, and that allowed me to go forward. And without that, I wouldn't have been sitting here. But when you are in a situation when you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, you should not give up, and you should try to find a way forward, a new path forward, because maybe the path you are walking on is not leading you forward. And if I'm to respond to Eszter, what she said, this is quite an intriguing concept, a collective overcoming of crises. I'm not sure where we can draw the line where the opportunity to do and not do the change is, where it's good to go out to the streets and when it's not good. And if I am to compare this to something that I can compare it to the situation in Belarus, they've been learning for dozens of years that going out and protesting in the street it has no effect. It's pointless, but still they keep protesting, even though the focus of world media is now on something something else. And this is quite inspiring because they keep going, and also following what's happening in Poland is quite inspiring. But someone else should speak about that. Thank you very much. I thank you for giving the floor to our next speaker. Marek, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'm also, like Esther, very happy to be here. And when Esther started to elaborate on that scientific perspective on helplessness, I started to reflect on moving from that helplessness to resourcefulness. It's true that what Karel has just mentioned, that we are like in the middle of a big political crisis in Poland. Like it's crazy what's going on, actually, and it's amazing how in an unexpected moment, people started to express their anger, their emotions, their long hidden frustrations in a way I never anticipated. I mean, I'm 28, so it's not that I've seen many crises in my life, but being involved in politics feels like being in a constant crisis every day. But I never thought I'd see a crisis where people go out to streets, and when in Poland you find yourself in a situation where thousands and thousands of people go protest in front of churches and voice their anger about 30 years of the Catholic Church's interventionism in our law, in our state, in our morality. That's something I never thought I'd see, and it's going on. So this shift can happen very rapidly. But coming back to the initial question, when I started to think, about a crisis situation and which transformed and has already led to something productive and positive. I think that a very good example comes from the city of Warsaw. As you know, as an elected official and the chairperson of the Environmental Matters Committee, when I sat down and started working in the council on Warsaw's environmental policies, well, I initially found it challenging because things like climate crisis, things like reducing CO2 emissions were really not at the prominent place in the city's agenda beforehand. And right now, it's 2020, we need to be carbon neutral in, well, 30, preferably 20 years, and it's a big challenge. It requires a lot of public support because some solutions we'll have to implement will hurt or will at least require change, and changing is difficult. No one likes changing. It costs energy. So what we started to think to do in Warsaw was to organize a citizens' assembly, a citizens' panel, something akin to what Emmanuel Macron did in France. So to build a city in a nutshell, elect citizens themselves to voice their concerns, to work with experts, to vote on solutions that the city has to implement. But here we found ourselves in a slight crisis, namely the fact that usually in the past it was the politicians who did such things. It was the city council who voted on policies, on strategies. It was the mayor who was sort of the face of all solutions as the executive branch. So many people who were already well established and thought that they can do that felt ousted out of power, thought that it's absolutely inappropriate, to take away that from them and give it to, well, people. They even questioned that, that then why should we be elected? What's the need of all that elections and representatives if we give that power to citizens panel? So it was a situation, well, nothing short of a gridlock. So for a long time, it was difficult to move it forward. But then what helped us was seeking out and reaching out to people who are really the greatest stakeholders, namely the youth. And suddenly it turned out that when we reached out to the youth, when we reached out to the youth climate strike, when we started talking to them, and we arranged a meeting with these fantastic young people, 15, 16-year-olds who are already protesting on the streets so regularly. It turned out that it took just one meeting, between the mayor and these young people, the sort of the key stakeholders, to persuade everyone that the Citizens' Assembly is the way to go, that it should be organized, that it's worth it to invest into it. And most importantly, there was a public promise on the part of the mayor that such an initiative would happen. So, boom! We found that, you know, sort of to I don't know how to call it, that battering ram, you know, that suddenly opened the gate, and it was a beautiful moment. And, you know, the panel is starting in 2 weeks, if I'm not mistaken. We are in the process of electing, you know, citizens who will be participants of it. So my lesson from it is find the key stakeholder, find someone who has that burning interest, you know, because it's these, you know, 15, 16-year-old who are right now most interested in sorting out the climate crisis. Well, I'm not saying I'm not interested, you know, as a fairly young person, I'd rather live in a thriving planet than on a dying planet. But the message that they managed to send was far more powerful than I could send as a councillor, than the city council could say, that even a protest could send. It turns out that they were the most effective. So there is this key, you know, you have a set of keys each time you face a crisis. So you just need to look for the correct one and you open the door.
Děkuji, Marku.
Thank you, Marek. That's very inspirational. That was a very inspirational comment.
Víc než podnětná, tak
Actually, more than inspirational.
Je složitější než podnětnější, abych tak
It's more complex than inspirational, if you know what I mean. But I have two questions for you, for all of you, I guess. Because from what I've heard, I noticed two key themes in your answers. One is the relationship between a crisis and helplessness. So first I'll ask the two questions and I'll you answer them. And we have to keep it brief to stick to the schedule. Can helplessness, as Eszter defines it in her work, and as it was described in both Marek and Karel's answer, could it be an expression of the current crisis? Because whether we look left or to the right, meaning politically speaking, to the left side of the political spectrum or the right side of the political spectrum, we basically see similar questions, similar problems. To put it very simply, none of them know what to do, whether it's the COVID or the climate change or the nuclear armaments that I mentioned. Now I'm getting back to Marek. Who are the actors? Who are the centers of power? There is no winter palace we can conquer now. Michel Foucault said that power is granular now. Power is everywhere around us. We are in a sort of a power center right now. So, and that brings me to the question, is helplessness an expression of a crisis? That's my first question. And the second question is, if so, where are the centers of power? For example, the media have huge power, then social media as well. And the communication that's taking place through screens, which, as some surveys say, is actually cheaper today because screens are produced in much more massive numbers, and it's easier to communicate this way than if we actually met here in person. There's actually an economic dimension to it. So these are two things I'd like to ask you about. They're very open questions. So the relationship between crisis and helplessness, and the word helplessness in Czech actually is powerlessness, so there's the word power in it. So what is the power that we should confront? Is it the power of the government? Is it the power of the corporations? Is it Silicon Valley? So what do you think? Marek, for example, can you start? And try to really stick to 1 minute. A 1 minute answer.
I'll set a timer. So firstly, regarding helplessness, my impression is that helplessness never exists on its own. It's always an emotion which is set in a context. And I remember it surfaced in a beautiful way in Warsaw a couple of months ago, where Extinction Rebellion organized a big march in June. Against it was about the march against extinction, as Extinction Rebellion is fighting for solving climate and biodiversity crises. But the march was actually organized in 4 separate sections. There was a section of hope, a section of helplessness, a section of despair, and a section of power. So helplessness is not on its own. It's always an emotion which is assisted with other feelings, and only when we look at these feelings and these emotions as a whole can we really get out of that terrible black zone where we can no longer do anything. We just need to look at it, but we must not forget that there are other things that we feel and they can be used as a leverage. And with regard to the centers of power, at the end of the day, I believe people know very well. They feel it instinctively where the power lies. Right now, the Polish people organized huge protests against the Catholic Church because they know very well that despite the fact bishops claim not to influence policymaking in Poland, it was the Catholic bishops who actually led to a near total ban on abortion right now. And the same, I guess, goes when we protest against, for example, unwise policy decisions which are made by the government. We know that the government can make these decisions just because it's corrupt, just because it's influenced in an intransparent way. And when people go against the government, I believe quite often they also go against corporate interests. And this government, the government they are unhappy with, has to be replaced, because this is the place where this corruption happens. This is the place which allows itself to be influenced by the wealthy, by the powerful, and by this they lost their democratic legitimacy, and it can be quite often regained only by changing it altogether.
To bylo velmi výstižné, děkuji. Eszter.
Thank you. Eszter, crisis, helplessness, power. What's your take on that?
I would really like your question, and I would like to ask back, since that's what I normally do. When you say where the centers of power are these days, I would like to distinguish between, the power to destroy or the power to actually create something, because destruction is a very easy thing to do, and you can leverage pretty much anything very easily. The other is, it's media, corporations, whatever. What happens if you don't really know? If it's so informal, it's not institutionalized at all. What if it gets into the hand of an informal group of people and you don't really know where to go to protest? Where is that building? Where is that symbolic space where you can do something? So, in my take, whatever happens, it's good to have multiple sources of power. It's good to have the media. It's good to have influencers who can challenge the media. It's good to have, the courts independent from the politics, and then the executive arm independent from the legislative arm, and all sorts of things. And it's good that they fight it off between each other, because then we are more safe. And at least we know where decision belongs where. When it just gets centralized into one spot, we are doomed. And that is what we should avoid.
Thank you very much. I would like to remark about the 2 types of power, the power to destroy and the power to create. That's a very important difference. So let's go on to Karel. I'm not saying COVID, if you don't mind. How do you see in this situation when COVID and COVID sounds very similar, so we should avoid that? That's another thing, yeah. So I'll stick to Karel. So how do you see the relationship between crisis, helplessness, powers, centers of power?
Now we can relate it to the climate crisis and COVID. There are problems that can overwhelm us. Climate change, everything that's happening around us, and we as individuals, we think that it's really difficult for us to fight this or stop it. And this applies globally. It's not something that we could solve by going into one building and convincing one person to introduce some kind of new policy. Concerning helplessness, if we speak about local problems, I think that provoking helplessness in society is the aim of all populists, and we can see this in what's doing Viktor Orban or Polish administration. It's about dismantling free media, dismantling the rule of law, trying to tell people that change is not possible, that development goes only one way. And in such a situation, people should try to find ways to change what's happening and not to succumb to helplessness and to do what populists want. It's about focusing on which changes are possible. What can we do to implement change? I'm wondering what can we do? How can I be specific? I think in the time of a pandemic, we can, for example, focus on positive things. I think that we are feeling helpless because of the pandemic, and we can maybe try to change things around us, support our loved ones, our friends, and try to spread positive energy. And I think that the recipe is different for each crisis. What I can say from my position is to focus on constructive solutions, trying to move things into a positive direction, or at least launch this effort. Excellent. Thank you. Let's hope that this will happen. I focus on the sociology of time and social acceleration. We will have to accelerate. I am here with my second question, and I will first ask this question, and then we will listen to a pre-taped poll. We asked this question in the streets of Ji.hlava. So, which civil or activities are you part of? So let's listen to this. So let's listen to the street. What is the crisis? A crisis is a state when everything is different to what it was before or what it will be. It's a milestone when something has to change and people have to stop thinking in the way they were thinking before. Crisis is when my heart is beating and I don't know what to do first, and everything that's around us now. It's a state when a current order is shaken, it's turned upside down, and all of a sudden it's working completely differently. And now everyone must change and start building it from scratch to avoid collapse. Well, something collapses unexpectedly, and it's difficult. A crisis is a moment when we are on a crossroads and we can decide to turn everything upside down. Crisis is what's happening now. Crisis is right now. Sometimes a crisis is something when you get up on the wrong side of the bed, and sometimes the whole world turns upside down. We've heard some interesting answers, how people see a crisis, a randomly selected or not randomly selected a notion of crisis. So my question is, in which initiatives or activities are you taking part? Because the word crisis is quite problematic if you look at the history of this notion. The notion crisis, Greek notion crisis, meant something different. Originally, it's a medical term. It's a place or a moment of decision when a doctor decides whether he will try to heal the patient, or the situation is so bad or so critical that it's necessary to go the other way and let it just go until that very end. That end, I mean death. That's the original meaning of the word crisis. And now we've just heard that crisis means collapse, crossroads, something that's happening now. So let me go back to the original question. Political activities, civic activities, are you part of some of these activities? And what kind of crises do you see in what you do or how you gain your living? Maybe we can follow up and we can. We spoke about helplessness, and we don't want to be maybe passive, helpless actors. We will be able to identify this crisis from various points of view and meet. I'm just improvising now, and the crisis, which is really definitely considered as a crisis, because my colleague Petr Fischer says that what was happening in spring was not a crisis because it was not transformative, it didn't change radically society. So how do you solve your personal crises, let's say, to put it lightly, let's say? But you can also go back to what I said a moment ago. Your activities, solutions of really burning crises that are here to stay. For example, global heating. I don't know how to translate that into Czech. Global heating, climate crisis in general, as it's called. I don't know whether some of you would like to respond first. So say whatever you like, whether you'd like to respond to something that I've just said. It's an open discussion. Marek, what do you think?
Yes, I think I have some reflections on that, because I have it sort of well mapped, what crises I am personally facing. Right, as you've said before, it's the ecological breakdown, the climate crisis. It's sort of global, so it impacts Warsaw and Poland in a different way, but it's there and it's going to stay. The second crisis, I think it's extremely important, and it sort of goes unnoticed, is the inequality crisis. At least in Poland, for example, it's still not mainstream to discuss, the vast discrepancies in wealth and income, which is ripping our society apart, and to make matters worse, as it's happening in Hungary, authoritarian regimes use it to consolidate their oligarch clique, which is the backbone of their power. This process is going on in Poland, and once it is fulfilled, it's extremely difficult to dismantle. And the third crisis, I think, which is especially painful, is the human rights crisis. And it's especially blatant when you are a EU citizen, and it is so easy to go to another EU country where abortion is perfectly legal, when suddenly someone decides in Poland that's no longer the case. When it is perfectly fine when you're gay to marry. And in Poland, we do not even have civil unions. Me as one of the, 10, maybe 12 openly gay people who hold elected offices in Poland. I've been fighting for this for quite a while, and here, the very early meaning of the word crisis you mentioned resurfaces. You've said that is the moment between healing and letting the patient die, and many people who are faced with these struggles, choose that, metaphorical death, which usually means migration, for example. And I can't count, the friends and the good people that Poland as a country and the Polish people as a society lost because they decided to left because they could no longer stand living in circumstances where not only they can't marry, not only that they can't have equal rights, but actually quite recently, for the last 2 years, their very human dignity was being tarnished actually every day because the government decided to target gay people and use them as a scapegoat for its propaganda. So maybe to wrap it up, because these crises are so overwhelming, and it's not that you can solve them in one afternoon, it requires massive perseverance to actually to survive, not even to fight them, just to survive, and not to say okay, I quit. And I believe that sort of the most important thing here is finding these personal connections, reintegrating, with other like-minded people, rebuilding these networks that might have been lost, because of the impact of social media, because of the impact of let's say, that capitalistic society we're in, and we've been around for quite a while, which rewards egoism and rewards maybe does not encourage that interactions that much. Coming back together as a group, and at the end of the day as a society, might be of tremendous importance. Firstly to become stronger, and then to fight back. Because at the end of the day, I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful because what we're seeing right now in the streets of Poland, well, maybe that's not going to topple the Law and Justice's government yet, but it is a formative experience for hundreds of thousands of people, and these hundreds of thousands of people will one day, hopefully, vote these guys out and help us build a more inclusive, progressive, climate-friendly country, which I wish for all of our region, to put it this way.
Mám jednu otázku ještě na vás, Karle.
I have a question for you, Karel, and perhaps for Eszter as well, if you have time for that. But I know if you have time, because time is the greatest power entity. Karel,
Vy jste mluvil o
you spoke about a crisis of creativity. Bill Clinton, when I was very young, he said during his election campaign, he said, "It's the economy, stupid. It's all about the economy, you dunce," right? So could this be one of the lasting key moments of the crisis of imagination? Because more and more things, yeah, I may say things, are reduced to a commodity that can be traded. For example, black rap in the 80s in American suburbs, it was a huge revolution against racism. What is rap today? It's a commercial product that's incomparable. Those are incomparable. What was skateboarding in the 1990s? I was a skateboarder in the 1990s. And I remember that it was a revolt against the status quo. It was a way towards liberation. We are fighting against injustice. When 20 Nazis ran up to us, we were fighting them. What's skateboarding today? It's just a commodity. There's a fantastic book by two Canadian authors, Joseph Heath and Sue Potter. In English, it's called Rebel Cell, which is a take on a David Bowie song which is called Rebel Yell. It's translated as By Your Own Revolt. So how do you see this? Doesn't have to do this commodification? Doesn't this commodification of everything that can be sold and turned to a commodity will be turned to the commodity? Isn't it the moment that prevents us from coming up, imagining better futures? Well, our imagination at this point is limited logically. We grew up in the system we grew up in, and suddenly we see that this system isn't going well anymore. It's sort of failing in its basic principles. We can take a look at the USA, the lighthouse of democracy and capitalism, which is now, and it's not a strong word, which is now falling apart. It's crumbling into dust. Logically, many Americans, especially young Americans, thinking if it isn't time to change the system, to modify the system. Nobody says what the system should look like. Everybody's afraid of change, and obviously the broad public is negative about these changes. We are looking at this crisis. Many populists work with creating sentiments in people. They're saying it was better before, or aren't doing well now. It will be better in the future, and we know how to do it. But what the system is going to look like? So I agree that perhaps we have a crisis of imagination, maybe. But on the other hand, we can honestly say, frankly say, that capitalism is the best of the worst systems, and we still don't have anything much better to replace it with. And if it's oligarchy or plutocracy, I don't think that's the way to go. Or the strong-hand rooms such as Trump, Orban, or Andrej Babiš, who is a bit of a comical version of the two. I don't think that's the way to go. It seems to me that none of us know which way to go, and it's maybe up to young generation to find it. Because I must confess that my imagination is hitting many barriers in this respect. I don't know which way I should shift the system in. My imagination is hitting many barriers, at least in the morning and in the evening as well. But I completely agree with you, and I see this major thing in what you said, that capitalism is able to function best in authoritarian hands. Democratic capitalism is becoming an oxymoron. No, I was saying democracy, not capitalism. I think we're running into a problem, and we can see this in the Czech Republic with COVID, that there's no trust towards the authorities. People don't trust, scientists don't trust, the government don't trust the state, because the government of marketing and populist solutions is falling apart in a crisis. All these are interesting things that are happening before our eyes, and soon, in the coming months and years, we will see the results. China or Singapore is a beautiful result, where there's something like centrally governed capitalism, and they are the two most prosperous countries in the world, at least based on some economic indicators. I would like to ask Eszter if we still have time, unless they shut me up. Because within your concept, which I was very excited to see, do you think that we are able to create, without any nationalist or xenophobic or racist sentiments, an awareness about what we share, what could be the thing that we have in common, what could be connecting us, not only as human beings, but also as relationship between people and nature, people and the mineral world, and people and systems, organizations that people have created for themselves, relationships between technologies and people and other actors in this world. Can we, as an important French thinker said, Bruno Latour says, can we return to Earth? And Earth is with lowercase e, or at the same time capital E. It's also the planet and also the dirt, or the, can we just keep our feet on the ground? I hope I expressed myself well. What do we have in common, if you can imagine what we all share?
Is the question for me, or
yeah.
you're still okay? So there's one thing that really strikes me is how pessimistic you are about people, because frankly, no matter what atrocities people do, what cause they join, they never actually do it with the bad intentions. People want to be better people. They want to improve themselves. They want good, even if they're misguided. And I think it's very important to have as much diversity of opinion out there and as much diversity of power, you know, just decentralized power out there, so that they never get under the influence just, you know, one central. I'm talking from Budapest, by the way. So, and just around the corner at the University of Film and Theatre, the students are occupying the building to protect academic autonomy. So there is hope in there. And even sometimes, you know, the worst acts are done with good intentions, and those good intentions can be harvested, as long as, you know, you don't get someone in the middle centrally planning things and ordering people around. That never fared well, not under communism, not under fascism, not under, regardless of ideology. As long as we have diversity, we are fine. People are really good, actually.
To je skoro jako finální věta.
That's like a final wrap-up sentence of an essential debate, and our debate is essential. And I have maybe a light-hearted question to wrap it up, and just a one-sentence answer, please. Do you think that we have the capacity? I'm not speaking only about our us Europeans, those who are well off, who are in the north, all four of us who are speaking here are part of the 10% who are well off globally. Living in unbelievable wealth. Can you imagine a future where the notion of responsibility will not only overcome crises, there will be new crises. This is connected to the crisis of imagination, because we don't know which crises are ahead of us. But can you imagine that we have a capacity, or maybe some competencies or skills to create a responsible intervention into public life, to be ready, to be better prepared for the crises that we are already facing, that are well known to us. I'm not speaking about the crises that are ahead of us. For example, the crisis, what are we going to do with all the diesel engines when we switch to a different fuels? All technologies, we don't know what to do with them. Is there a way, a space or a sentence or a call or something? That's up to you. How to better prepare for future threats that might be even more serious than what we are facing now, because COVID can just be a starter. This is what I said, and I really think about it. Let's speak about COVID to make it more simple. Is COVID just preparing us for something more serious? Should we see COVID like this? Should we see COVID as just a preparation for a more drastic crisis, which will struck the planet in the future? I am a pessimist, so I see another crisis coming. In this COVID management, are we doing it? Are we doing well, or just be brief, please? Eszter, can you start, please? And then Marek and Karel.
When it comes to the COVID situation, the thing I'm most concerned about is the authoritarian responses to this and how it spread from China for the first time in history. I mean, I couldn't believe my eyes how fast it spread all over the world, and how what kind of authoritarian measures were put in place very fast, unprecedented. So I just hope that it won't linger, otherwise it will cause the next crisis of a completely different nature.
My answer to your question is resounding yes. COVID is just the very first thing that struck. on one hand, I agree with Esther. I was shocked to see how little democratic accountability was involved when limits were imposed on populations. But on the other hand, this crisis demonstrated that the thing we need badly to solve crises are strong institutions of the state, because it turns out that any private individual response will simply collapse. So the question is how to find the balance between the two. On one hand, not to slip into authoritarianism, and the other, how to build these strong institutions which are just professional, effective, can act quickly, and then secure us. And where can we find resources, usually financial resources, to build these institutions and make sure they are there in place to protect us when the need arises?
And I would agree with both of you, basically, because it's interesting to see how the response differs. Pardon, mluvím v češtině.
I am sorry, I was speaking in English. It was very interesting to see the responses in various countries. Let's take the example of New Zealand, Australia, Central Europe. Each country, in relation to its past, is responding differently. It's logical that our region is more sensitive to various restrictions and lockdowns. We have this totalitarian past, but it's, I think, good to speak about the crisis of trust, trust into democratic institutions, because without trust, it's obvious we cannot face these situations. And without a strong system which is ready to face such a crisis, it's very fragile. Everything is very fragile, and if there is no trust, it's fragile, and then therefore there is no support in these institutions. But this support is needed. Three final comments, and I synthesized them from our debate, and I'm not sure whether this is 100% right, but the first comment, well, I am a fan in my educational activities at the university. I always say it's better to ask a good question than to receive 1,000 answers and with no answer, with no question. So I will try to formulate or phrase my 3 points as questions. So the first point is, how can we fight internalization of helplessness? This is related to what Eszter said. The second question is, how can we eliminate the crisis of creativity, which was mentioned by Karel? And the third one, which is related to what Marek said, how can we transform or translate helplessness in all its forms and extents into resourcefulness? I really like that. These are 3 questions which sum up our debate, and I think that we will say goodbye with these 3 questions. Thank you very much for taking part, Marek, Eszter, Karel. Thank you very much. Excellent debate. We could go on for 2 more hours, but time is very powerful, as I've already said. So I'd like to say goodbye to you and to our viewers and listeners, and I am looking forward to seeing you again. And it's not a cliché. And take care.